All right, seeing none, let's move on to second semester school culture report. Let's have we got a whole team up here today.
Yeah, we're bringing it.
So briefly, let me introduce this. Obviously, this is Assistant Principal John Passarella. Our new Dean of Students, Mr. Neil DeGetti. Our current Dean of Students, Dave Sibley. And our Assistant Dean of Students, Ms. Lori Sullivan. And they're here to report on second semester attendance, discipline, and bullying data.
What I'd like to do is we'll go through this as it was presented, the questions, and then we could answer those in the order they were in.
It's your presentation.
We'll start with the attendance. Mr. Sibley, Mr. Dugetti, and Ms. Sullivan will speak to that.
I'd like to thank the board, by the way, for bringing Neil DeGetti on board as a full-time dean. I appreciate that very much. Page 68, question number 1, what are the reasons for the other 11 absences per day not addressed below? On the list that I send the board, I do not put every absence on
Well,
that list.
we should probably start by explaining the chart and explaining the data and then go into the questions.
I put the data together just to give you your brief viewpoint of what took place last semester at school, and I just put some items on there where everybody could see what's going on with our attendance. When we get to question number 1 on page 68 for 11 absences per day not addressed below, if you look at the occurrences broken down, I don't have all those listed. I don't have
blood drive.
I don't have the blood drive on there. I don't have the kids going to assemblies put on there. Some of those are excused absences where they would affect those numbers, and the list would be a lot longer than what I give here. I try not to overwhelm everybody with numbers. Question number 2, 13 absences per day. Again, we've had some situations where we had some students that we could not get to school. They were in transition being tested for special ed. Once they are in that transition, my hands are tied, and I can't withdraw them or remove them from the rolls for the attendance purposes. We've had a couple seniors that we were trying to get through the system. We try to reduce dropouts, and sometimes it hits us on the attendance numbers that we're pushing through. A couple kids we've really pushed through, and they've actually graduated even though they affected us attendance-wise on our numbers. Number 3, if I read this right, it's a question of 108 absences per day. Again, when we talk about the doctor's notes and everything, that we had a couple students that were marked absent for almost the whole semester, and they were marked out through illness. They were in the hospital. One was in the hospital actually twice per semester, which will affect our numbers. Things that we're doing to address these numbers, first of all, we've hired Neil as a full-time dean. We've kept Lori as the assistant dean, which will help us attack these numbers and be more aggressive in dealing with these with a little bit more follow-through. We're also doing some other things. I'm attending Check and Connect, which is, let me pull my notes out real quick, which is a model of sustained intervention promoting students' engagement at school and learning. Demonstrate outcomes of Check and Connect include increased attendance, persistence in school, accrual of credits, and school completion, which will decrease truancy, tardies, behavioral referrals, and dropouts. I'll be attending that seminar in St. Paul with Ms. Tappert and Ms. Isham. It's a 3-day seminar where they're going to train us how to train staff on how to deal with Connect and Check and Connect.
Ms. Tappert, so the board is clear, Ms. Tappert, Ms. Isham are?
Behavioral interventionist and a social worker.
Okay.
We're also going to try to incorporate next year more of the PBS with getting students to school when they have full classroom attendance, everyone's on time. We're going to try to use more of that to rewarding students when they are in class on time.
Do me a favor, let them know what PBS, let that crowd.
It's basically a positive behavior system where you reward students for doing the right thing. And we've been doing it for the last couple of years. Now we're going to really try to emphasis on not just like behavior, good behaviors, but more on attendance. We also created an attendance protocol for next year where we're going to be incorporating not just the dean's office, but we want to incorporate special ed office, student services, the athletic director's office, and the music and band director. So if students start accumulating a lot of absences, we're gonna reach out to those other groups so they can help us grab those students, find out what's going on. So it's more than just us repeatedly speaking to those students, but it's their coaches or everyone else that's involved. One thing we did this year that we've never done is we did disciplinary articulation, where we've worked with the feeder schools. Hauser, Gross, Camargue, we spoke to the assistant principals. We asked them, what would you like from us as a high school? And then we spoke to them about certain things that we did, our language in the discipline handbook, what we are expecting of students when they come into RB. Then what we did this year is we went to those feeder schools and we met with the incoming 8th graders. And we talked about 3 things that we are looking for: cell phones, appropriate language, and attendance issues, and how important it is to be here at RB. You just can't get dropped off at 7:58 and think that you are on time. You need to get here sooner, you need to get to your locker. Those are little things that will matter. Because a lot of times students will be coming, they'll be rushing to school and they get hit by the train. They're stuck. Then all of a sudden, now they're absent, they're unexcused. So we do fight with some of those things, car trouble, and it does affect the attendance overall. But we're going to be very proactive next year, and we're going to make some serious improvements.
I think probably one of the more exciting opportunities having 2 deans is to be able to aggressively, systematically, and consistently go after attendance on the early side, and really be able to have greater follow-through with those students and follow up with the counselors and all the stakeholders involved, including the parents, and get a better handle on those students. We're generating those reports from this year, and so that when we enter next year and a student comes down, we're not starting from square one again. If there was a pattern of inappropriate or unacceptable attendance, we'll be able to aggressively address it and have a conversation that has more depth than it's just starting again. So that's a very exciting opportunity for the office.
Are you involving the parents more too?
Yeah, we want to get in contact with the parents more frequently. We want to grab the counselors, student services, the behavior interventionists, and work with everybody included.
Set up meetings with parents, bring them in on a more consistent basis.
And we'll be able to do that.
And continue to look at your procedures so that such things as like assemblies and blood drives,
Yeah.
1-day suspensions, those are things that as you tighten up your procedures, those can make a difference in your average daily attendance. And so the board remembers, while this is a goal, one is being at school is going to help you be successful, which plays into our ACT goals and our graduation goals, but also our state aid funding is based on our average daily attendance on an annual basis. So it's important to continue to try to grow that percentage of students so that we get a larger calculation in our state aid funding from the state.
I thought Mr. Sidney maybe was asking a broader question than that. When I read this, our proactiveness is studying data and going after people having problems. How proactive are we at just trying to get the message out to the parents and guardians of the kind of problems we see with kids showing up for school and how important it is for them to, the days when they just don't feel like coming.
Unfortunately, we do that, and sometimes we'll
How
have
do we
parents that
do it,
say,
O'Neill?
there's nothing I can do, they won't come.
But I mean, how do we do it as a general proposition of educating the parents and guardians, not kids with problems, just ahead of time?
Open house.
And as of now, what we do is we send out the tardy call. It's an automatic dialer. When the student's tardy for school, throughout the day, they will get an automatic phone call home, so they'll get that message saying your child was tardy or your child was absent for that day, and then we expect the parent to call back. Those are the things that we're doing. We actually put a newsletter out last semester, stating that we wanted our students to be at school and the reasons why their students should be at school. And we'll continue to do that, and as we work together, we'll be able to put that out more for
And they get the
families.
Skyward email too, so it's like a Skyward blast. So then we'll get a parent that will email us back saying, sorry my child was absent, or sorry my child was late first period, we got stuck by the train, or whatever the situation. So we try to be in a little bit better contact with parents, using more usable communications.
I have a question on the table. So these occurrences broken down by reason, I'm assuming the blue are entire days, but the black are periods. Are those lines included in the top part where it says average excused students, or are they in addition?
They're included.
So that's the breakout or the explanation for that
Yep.
top line?
Yes.
Okay. Another question, when you do the automatic dialer phone messages, do you have any feedback that parents value that, or that they even get those messages?
We typically get, for the Skyward Blast, that's when I usually get a parent will send things back. Sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're not, you know.
That's the
But-
email system?
Yes, and sometimes they understand, they're aware that their child was late. Some parents say, my child was 30 seconds late, my child was in the office, and then we deal with it from there.
And then for the attendance roles, we'll get calls and said, no, my son was excused, I called in, or I'm calling my son in now. So it does, it's proactive, it gets the parent on top of the student so they know what's going on.
And do we also alert the parents to all the tools we have in open houses, or open, you know what I mean, where we have the parents' meetings, or?
Freshman We Are RB.
Well, the first thing we did was speak to the feeder schools, and then we're gonna look into some more ways of reaching out to those students for next year.
Okay.
That's our goal this summer.
Well, and I think what Mr. Walsh was getting at, and you mentioned the communication that you do early on, I think, periodically you got this email reminding them of the importance, reminding them that there are trains, reminding them there's all kinds of things and what it means to be on time and
Right.
It's a great
not.
tool.
You got an email.
Yeah.
Short and sweet, too, because if
Yeah.
it's too long, they'll delete it.
They'll delete it, I agree.
Kevin, how's the average daily attendance calculated? Is it excused, unexcused? And how do we compare, question number 2, how do we compare with other schools for that?
Yes.
When we set our goal, off of the average daily attendance of the report cards, which was around 97%. So the board's goal, I believe, is 97 or 95%, which is where the top 10 public high schools were at in regards to average daily attendance.
So does an excused absent count?
Yes. Any absence counts.
Any absence?
Excused, unexcused. If you're absent, it counts. So
is
what
it
you
by
want to,
periods or
what you
days?
want to tighten, it's by days, but what you want to tighten up is the unexcused absences or the tardies where kids are maybe lingering in the halls and they're more than 5 or 10 minutes late, so the teacher marks them absent because they missed the first 10 or 15% of the class. Some of the bookkeeping stuff that we just talked about tonight with the blood drives and the assemblies, I mean, those are all things, you're going to have kids be sick, you're going to have kids cut class. But if you try to really address the cuts and the tardies, you can see an impact on the overall average daily attendance usually.
And going after those early and consistently is gonna definitely impact those numbers as well, in
All
a
right,
positive way.
Any other questions on the second semester attendance report?
I still have a question on this. When is a day absent? Is it a partial day or?
4 periods is a partial day, any more than that is a full day.
So what stops schools from gaming this system? I mean, since money's involved.
Don't know, integrity?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Okay, anything else? All right, let's move on to your next section.
Page 69,
Yeah,
the suspension report comparison.
Yes.
There was a question regarding, with 170 unexcused tardies and cuts per day, this seems low, the amount of suspensions. Obviously, that is what they want. The interventions are progressive for attendance-related issues with students and those who are truant. The last thing you want to do is send those students home. And so that's what they've been doing, and cutting the same way. So the ADA, the alternative day assignment in-school suspension room was open. In there, they're receiving their education, they're receiving services, with Saturday detention, and we have other interventions, building and activity restrictions. So we want those students in the building. Those who are excessive and are, abusing what's going on, then you have no choice in some cases. We try to limit that, and that is why that number is 3. It's not to play with the numbers, it's to truly utilize as many of the resources we have in the district and in the building to keep those kids in school, because many of them are dealing with issues well beyond just what we see on the surface. These aren't, kids just cutting to cut. There's some underlying issues that the other departments are addressing with them as well. I'm on the bullying report now. There was a few questions on there. One of the questions was,
That's the attendance. It's not that.
on page 71, is there a method for students that call anonymously to check the status and outcome? If the student who is calling it has observed it. And so their observation is what we're counting on, either repeating that, that submitting another report, or knowing it. Typically, once you're involved in these investigations, when you receive an anonymous tip about two separate students, when you bring the victim in and you speak to the victim, they acknowledge what's going on. When you're hearing the information about where it's occurring, you're realizing who your witnesses may be. And so potentially, it's a friend, but not necessarily all the time. Could be a classmate. And so once that's being addressed at that point, because you never speak to the alleged bully until you speak to the victim first. You want to make sure it's legitimate, and you want to make sure the victim has a comfort level of what could be occurring as you move forward in your investigation. Because you don't want to put the victim in a more hostile situation, at least perceived by the victim. And so in that case, the only way they're going to know back is, in fact, the status and the outcome is by observing it again.
I think it was Tim's question, Tim Walsh. But
Yeah.
I think what he was getting at is a lot of these corporations now
Right.
have hotlines to report wrongdoing, and those hotlines will give the person who's reporting it a number
Right.
to, not only a phone number, but a number of their complaint.
Right.
And they can call back in 3 weeks and find out what happened.
That's
Was it
exactly what I was
addressed or
getting
not?
at, because
Okay.
that
We'll
way
look
it
at some.
allows the person who's making an anonymous complaint to find out, did school take action, and
And I-
see if they have comfort with it.
And I understand what you're saying, John. Most of the time, people will figure it out, but this would guarantee it.
The victim, how is this done for anonymous calls? And if I could, do I understand your question in the sense that you're trying to figure out how I loop to the victim? Do you know what your question was specific to? For number 2?
Old page 71.
Yeah, I'm on page
Okay.
71, I'm sorry.
Which is
Oh, well, now
new
82.
page 82.
Oh, okay. It's still old for me, sorry.
Yeah, please
Got
contact,
you covered.
parent contact is made after report is determined to bullying. The student's guidance counselor or dean follows up with both the alleged bully and the victim. Well, if it's done an anonymous call, which I assume is done by the victim, how do you know you're following up with them? If it's anonymous. Or it could be,
Somebody else calling.
A lot of times, yeah.
It's usually somebody else
there'll
might be
another
witnessing
student.
something.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the
The
problem.
victim
That's
doesn't
what's-
always
yeah.
do it.
okay.
Yeah.
So what you're saying right now is that anonymous calls, a majority of them are people who have witnessed it and are not the
Yeah.
victims
Correct,
themselves.
100%.
Yeah.
But if I am a victim and I want to make an anonymous call, I don't want to be called in to be questioned as the victim, or I wouldn't have made
Well-
an anonymous call in the first
Well,
place.
the reason, and I appreciate your question, and I understand it totally. The reason for the anonymous bullying reporting system is so that it begins the process.
Right.
Anonymous meaning, see, what doesn't happen is the victim, when the victim is in my office, I'm not going to the alleged bully saying, the victim said you did this.
Right.
So we're working with the facts we have as far as how many other witnesses.
And sometimes it's somebody saying, I saw this person doing this.
Exactly.
They're not gonna say this person was doing this to so-and-so. So a lot of times we'll have to address that person and say, is this really going on? Are you really doing this? And just have a conversation with them. And we don't even know the name. They just say, I see this person doing this.
Yeah,
And it's
when the
very-
victim reports it, the anonymous portion of it isn't them not coming in. It's a quiet entrance, as far as beginning the
don't say
investigation,
any
and then
names.
keeping them out of it. So it's not like it's publicized, the victim is there, and they had reported it. There are some times when the victim says, I want them to know I'm reporting it. But the anonymous reporting system, in a sense, it gives the victim an opportunity to begin the process without having to physically come in initially, so that it begins the investigation.
Well, I'm kind of looking at it more from the other. If I'm a victim who's been bullied, and I don't want to be bullied again, but I do want to do something about it, and I want it to be anonymous, how do you accomplish that? Because if you can't accomplish that, the next person's, especially if the person gets bothered again, the next person is going to say, well, that anonymous system just doesn't work. Everybody finds out about it, and you're going to get bullied again. So I'm not quite understanding it here, the way, and I'm sure it's just the way it's laid out, how the anonymous system is protecting the victims and so they want to use the system.
Well, I guess if I pulled anonymous off,
Okay.
that's a bullying reporting system.
Okay.
And if that word isn't there, anonymous, it's a bullying reporting system. And it is anonymous in the sense of this. First off, when the bully's reporting, the victim is reporting something that is allegedly happening to them, that is their way of reaching out to you.
Right.
They don't want to stay anonymous to the office. It's to the situation. They want to stay away from it. And so what'll take place is, and I'd rather not go on, camera and say what what we're doing for the victim.
Right.
Is approach it in a manner that keeps the victim out of it. That's where the anonymous is in place. It's not necessarily the reporting portion of it, it's the moving forward with the investigation and potential discipline of it.
Okay.
And we're very cautious of that. That's why 3 departments receive this, or 2 departments. The dean's office, the deans, myself, and the student services. So we loop with the counselors to see if something is going on with this child before we contact the child, the victim.
And do you monitor then, so when you have a reporting of a person that's a bully, and then you sit down and talk to them, is there monitoring that goes on throughout?
We loop back with the victim, and then through the counselors and our office, depending on the situation. Sometimes the victim doesn't want to physically come down again, so you'll ask them to email you.
And
So there is a loop, yes.
And a lot of times we'll look and see if this is actually happening. We'll look to see if behavior is actually taking place in the hallways, in the classrooms, wherever it is, so then we can actually see it for ourselves. And that way it stays very anonymous where the student doesn't know. We're just kind of observing and taking an idea of what's taking place.
But if you have a bully that is a bully all the time,
Yes. we do.
how do you monitor him, or is he on the radar screen?
Well, if in fact he's been deemed as a bully or she, a lot has taken place to get to that point. And there have been meetings with parents and potentially with police at times.
Okay.
We have had that occur. And there is documentation and follow-up. It's critical because you don't want the victim to feel like it was a one-time shot and they're done. It's not like that.
Okay.
As far as false reports, those are, if I should have said jokes, they're humorous reports from the student's perspective who are submitting them. They are totally pranks in the sense of what they're saying. It would be like,
We get it.
Mr. Sibley's hair is bullying, Mr. Passarella's hair. I mean, it's something as ridiculous as that. So that's where those get categorized. in.
But do we go after them and tell them that this is not
Well,
If it's anonymous.
It's anonymous.
we really don't want to go after the IP
Most of
address.
them aren't
That's where
gonna
you speak
admit
to the
it's fine.
anonymous. You really don't want to do that, for what it's worth.
okay.
Well, I will tell you, going back to Ed supporting me on this, and we have a similar system, and most big corporations do. Everybody's told it's anonymous unless you make a false complaint or there's a crime or a follow-up that has to be made. So if you're not being burdened with a few jokes and can deal with it, it's one thing. But if you're spending time on anonymous complaints that shouldn't be wasted time, you should consider whether you make an exception in the case of people that are abusing the system like
Right.
that.
Okay,
The next question was on the bullying report, the new programs. And I'm looking for my document, I must have left it on my desk, we're going over it. The Check and Connect is the 3-day workshop Dave is going to. It's where it's empowering students and embracing them and trying to reconnect with them. Lion's Quest is a program where in fact it's for special needs students and enabling them to realize and how to move forward with addressing inappropriate behavior that they may be experiencing. Mind you, these are all new programs. The Renew and Cast are also real similar. Cast, what it does is it's almost on the back end, but it pulls students out who in fact are displaying inappropriate behavior, and they're putting in sessions, 12 interactions per session. Once again, these are new programs. We're trying to see how they fit, and I'm trying to recall what Renew was. It's once again with the staff. And it's the classroom teacher, I believe, Lori, am I right? Yes, it's a curriculum-based instruction. What we're trying to do with these 3 programs, these programs are proactive, not reactive. We're trying to, and they are, empowering students on how to respond to bullying. Not for the bully after the fact, and here's what's gonna happen to you. That measure we're trying to avoid having to deal with, that's the punitive side. These measures here are to be proactive to the student body, to in fact those students who are not just victims but observers, and how to approach that to prevent the bullying from occurring, and what to do if it's happening to you. We're very excited about these, not sure how they're gonna fit yet, so they're all being kind of looked at and determine how they fit into our B's kind of mold and shape. Because it's unique on the needs depending on the bullied situation.
Okay, any questions on this?
Yes.
Mike?
In the summer of 2009, we met as a board in the LaGrange Park area. You came and spoke to us about two of the three topics you talked to us today. I don't think the word bullying was mentioned at all back then. So over the last 5 years, for sure, bullying has been moved forward into the forefront of things that are happening in the school that we're trying to protect our students against. So my overall question is, looking back on the school year we just finished, did we have a good year for student culture and incidents?
I'm going to be straight up with you. I believe it was one of the best years we've had. What happens is we're in a learning environment of 1,551 humans, along with the interaction of over 125 staff. You're going to have conflict. Kids, and that's where what took place when Mr. Dugetti was talking about going to the elementary schools to go back. That's where it's beginning. I had a parent call me right now from one of our feeder schools on, my child's been bullied all their life. Nothing's been done. What can we do now? And it's almost like they're looking to us as a school because they know we're addressing it. Because of, as we see in society, the end result sometimes is tragic. And that's what we're fighting right now, to avoid that. So yes, but we're a reflection of society.
Right.
And that's what's just going on.
We had a couple incidents that
It was a learning year.
with learning year, but I mean,
But
some chickens
A
and
few years
some
back,
TPing and,
But
I mean, we should be honest and say
Well,
there
no,
were,
but
there were a
those
few
things in the
incidents.
school, but when we're looking at it from our office, and the culture, when you talk about the culture of a school, it's not the incident, it's the everyday walking down the hallway. How does that child feel walking down the hallway? How does that child feel in the cafeteria? How does a child feel in the PE department? Mind you, are there bullying situations or intimidating situations or awkward situations in those venues? Yes. But those of you who have had children here, they'll tell you it's a great place to be. And so we're addressing those, whether it's the chickens or something else that takes place in a school. But overall, it's an incident. It's not pervasive on a daily basis. That's the difference. These are isolated situations
I think that's
that get the attention of press and of our community, and should, but it's not the culture of our school.
It's a good explanation, you're right.
And I believe, from my perspective, sitting on the board, I believe that to be true, and I believe that to be the work of the staff sitting in front of
100%.
us.
Starts in the classrooms, and what they're sending the message to those kids, what's not acceptable. And it works its way up to us, but it starts in the classrooms, and it begins at home.
And we had a blip a few years ago with a certain,
It happens.
faction of students that came through, and we made our way through that. But I'm happy to hear that you think that, our kids are getting a positive experience, because that's not one of our real district goals that is
It's
measurable.
hard to measure that.
And it's good for, the
We
board to
feel
hear
it.
that, and the public to hear that our kids are being taken care of.
The climate of your school is visible in your cafeteria. It's a great place to eat. It's a great place to be. It's not a threat. It's not awkward. It's a great place.
Okay, any other questions for them?
Do we have any kind of outreach or parent surveys that go out through your Skyward or anything at the end of the year? Do you ask the parents? Do the parents feel like we're doing a good job addressing bullying? Do you feel like your child is safe? Do you feel like we're addressing your parents' need? Do we have anything like that?
We don't, we can.
We did a culture survey last year. We do it every other year by the state on that 5 essentials, where there is a portion for parents to report on school culture and resources. So that's done every other year.
And the great thing with our community, Laura, is they're very willing to contact us when in fact they feel something isn't right. And that's a great open door policy we have.
But we have created some surveys over the last year or two as part of my goals with the board and communication on like how parents felt that residency went or open house went or how their course selection went. That might be something this group wants to think about, of doing a short 5-question or 7-question survey that parents can take at the end of each semester. So if there is an issue that seems to be consistent, maybe we can address it for the upcoming semester.
I think
It's
that's,
easy enough.
I think that would be very well, especially since you have Skyward. that you
Yeah,
worked in.
it's easy.
And also, you don't know if your statement's actually true, John.
Which one?
You don't know if people aren't if there's people who are unwilling to report to.
Yeah, you'll never know.
You know the ones that will and the ones you don't, but can you go into just a little, you had 161 submitted and 134, only 14 were bullying.
Sure.
And you said people are using for other purpose. We talked about this as a board. Should we change the description and not call the bullying helpline and?
The form is being revised as we
Okay.
speak.
And the other thing is, if you think of that, and I don't know if you can do it with your system, and what, like Ed mentioned, if you do it with anonymous, it says in here, if you're anonymous, we might not be able to follow up. I know in our system, you can follow up, and the company can also follow up with you and say, you know, I'm anonymous number 123. We tried to investigate it, but we need some additional information. Can you submit so and such and such and such, or names or dates, so that we can continue to try to investigate it? And unfortunately, this tool doesn't have that ability right now.
Well, I've met with Ms. Smetana. Her and I were looking at how we move forward with the form. If in fact we put something on the form like this, don't connect with me, don't contact me, or contact me, and it's submitted, because if you look at the form, on the top it says, who are you, basically?
Right.
You know, what if I'm submitting a bullying report against him?
Right.
And I want you to believe it's him, and I'm gonna say, see me, even though I know it's gonna do just what he doesn't want to have happen. That's the flaw in that. And there's nothing that's gonna be flawless. So we're really looking at what's best. How do you contact the victim and keep it anonymous? That's why we go through the counselors. When the bullying reports are coming in, oftentimes, they don't even come to me, the student. Once we contact the counselor and they've read their report, they say, John, I'll take care of it. This is what's going on with this child. Beautiful, you've been working with them? So it never gets to me, unless the actions don't stop, you know, of the person or whatever situation going on. But we're recreating the form as we speak.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
John.
very much. Thanks. I really appreciate all your help on this.
Thank you.
Let us know with these new programs what's happening, maybe end of fall or something like that. Let us know.
First semester.
After first semester.